I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to our final community call before we all make our pilgrimage to Chartres, where I am now. I just got in a day ago, and I spent the afternoon walking around the central part of the city and visiting the cathedral and re-immersing myself in the grandeur that is Chartres. So I welcome you in that spirit. The picture that you saw was a painting by Madonna that I came across 2 weeks ago in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, which when I came across it, it was there because he was a contemporary of Van Gogh. But it was so arresting and so exemplematic of everything that we are preparing to honor as we join together in Chartres in a month's time, that I dubbed her Madonna Astronomica and sent it out as our final communication with regards to this call and our opening meditation as we gather on Pentecost. And so welcome. We'll begin as we always do with Apela's invocation, and then I'll have a few words to introduce our subject for today. Apela?
Welcome to our final call of Pre-Chartres 2019. I'm lighting the seed this morning to purify and to bless this call. The blessing of the flame, the purifying. We remember this morning Our Lady, Mother Earth, Mother Mary, and we think now as if in looking through the smoke of the veil of the sacred tunic, the relic that reminds us of the world indivisible from the world we live in, the journey through the veil. The Black Madonna is a journey into our depths, a journey into terror and horror, in this case of our own human making, and then to ecstasy should we emerge from the darkness with the gold. Our community, Mother, at Chartres comes to you in all of your fecundity, in all of your majesty, in all of your horror and terror. We face this in ourselves, we face this in life, and we look to you, the light within the darkness, to help us emerge, the magnificent beings of creation and light, with the shadow accompanying us that we were put on this earth to be. We give thanks that we come in this mortal form through you, Mother Earth, and we return to be soil with you once again as our light life soars. We give thanks for renewal, and we look forward to this call and to the coming experience at Chartres, expressly for the purpose of remembrance, renewal, and open-hearted love. Ah, Mama, ua noa.
Thank you, Apela. Thank you for reminding us of the grandeur and the polarity of the Mother, of the Madonna. As we indicated in our communications about this call, we wanted to, in our final gathering on the Zoom line, to honor the Madonna in all her dimensions, because it's at the feet of the Madonna that we will bend the knee when we come to Chartres. As we all know, beginning with the Druids over 3,000 years ago, the telluric energies of this place are a tonality that expresses a very deep aspect of the feminine. And so potent is this reverberation of the feminine from this hill of Chartres that the Druids and the Celts considered Chartres to be their Vatican, their seat, and the most sacred site in all of Europe. And it's here that we gather every year to dedicate ourselves to realizing our full human potential through the gateway of the Madonna, of the Mother, of the Virgin, of Mary Magdalene, of the Black Madonna. So we want to dedicate this call to the Madonna. And we're very graced to have Anne Baring with us, who will begin our reflections in her own way about what the Madonna has meant historically and for her spiritually. Then we'll hear from Banafsheh Sayyad, who's been carrying the Madonna in her heart for many, many years. And then finally from Apela, who's been refracting the Madonna through the Celtic and Druidic traditions, as we all know, and carrying that fractal in our community over the past 15 years. And then after we hear from them, these are all just different representations of the Great Mother. So each woman will speak in her own way. We'll open it up to anyone else who wants to share their perspective or any comments or questions that they might have on anything that's been offered thus far. And then Apela will give us our benediction at the end, and we'll bless each other. And the next time we convene will be in this sacred site in the beginning of July. So Anne, I welcome you and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm unmuted now, I think. Now, my presentation is rather unusual because I was told about a book in February called Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, by a woman called Claire Hartsong. It's channeled messages that were delivered to Claire. And I didn't pay much attention until suddenly Banafsheh on Tuesday asked me to write something for today. And I remembered this book, and I had read it before, but I'd gathered all the very precious elements of it to tell you about it today, because I think it fills the missing background to the gospel stories in a fascinating and comprehensive way. The focus of this story is Anna's life as a member of the Essene community based at Mount Carmel in the northwest corner of Palestine, overlooking the sea. Although they traveled widely, Anna and Joachim, the grandparents of Jesus, were based here. The woman we know as the Virgin Mary was their daughter. They were deeply devoted to each other and to her, and to preparing her for her great mission as the highest embodiment of the divine feminine on this planet and the future mother of the Messiah. In the Christian tradition, Anna is known as St. Anne and is portrayed in Leonardo's famous drawing in the National Gallery in London, showing the Virgin with St. Anne sitting behind her, pointing upwards to the celestial city, with Jesus and John the Baptist as infants in the foreground. In her previous lives, and there were many that she recounts, Anna had undergone many years of initiation in the mystery schools of the Egyptian temples, preparing for her future role as the mother of Mary and the grandmother of Jesus. In these lives, she'd become highly skilled in the sacred arts of alchemy, or the transmutation of human consciousness from base metal into gold, as taught in these temples. In her life as the grandmother of Jesus and the mother of Mary, she was a high priestess of the order of Essenes and a teacher and initiator of many young men and women. She was also a highly skilled midwife who assisted in the many births that took place at Mount Carmel. The Essenes are mainly known through the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran, at the head of the Dead Sea, in the years 1946 to 56. The Essene sect came into being about 100 years before the birth of Jesus, in the 2nd century BC, and continued for some 68 years after his crucifixion. The Essenes traced their origins back to the ancient Egyptian mystery schools of Moses and Akhenaten. They lived as part of a reclusive, disciplined agricultural community, electing their own leaders and set apart from the mainstream social, political, and religious Judaic practice of the temple in Jerusalem. They honored women as equal with men. Both were taught to become channels for the teaching imparted from the divine Mother-Father source. The Essenes at Mount Carmel believed that there was a divine plan for the evolution of humanity on this planet, and devoted themselves to preparing their souls for the incarnation of a Messiah who would come to earth from the higher regions of the cosmos and further the divine plan. The essential teaching of the Essenes was designed to help people connect with the divine spirit within them and to free themselves from the trammels and habits of egoic consciousness. In one of the Essene Gospels quoted in Anna's book, we find these words: "When God saw that his people would perish because they did not see the light of life, he chose the best of Israel so they might make the light of life shine before the sons of men. And those chosen were called Essenes because they taught the ignorant, healed the sick, and gathered on the eve of every seventh day to rejoice with the angels. The Essenes knew that life is eternal and that there was an initiatory path to the realization of this revelation. They cultivated what today we would call Christ consciousness. Here is one fragment which bears witness to their experience. I have reached the inner vision, and through thy spirit in me, I have heard thy wondrous secret. Through thy mystic insight, thou hast caused a spring of knowledge to well up within me, a fountain of power, pouring forth living waters, a flood of love and all-embracing wisdom, like the splendor of eternal light." It was in the Essene community at Mount Carmel that Anna and Joachim met, married, and raised 11 children. Anna had previously been married and given birth to a son who became known as Joseph of Arimathea. He became a highly respected merchant with a large fleet of ships and traveled widely to India in the east and as far west as Cornwall and Glastonbury in England, where he was received by the Druid community. He was the half-brother of Mary and the uncle of Jesus. Mary, or Mary Anna as she was named, was the 12th child of Joachim and Anna, and they both underwent many rigorous initiations in order to prepare to receive her soul, as well as to prepare her to receive the soul of Jesus, or Yeshua as he was known. Anna and Joachim prepared for the time when they were told that the conception of Mary Anna was at hand. They had to pass 7 initiations in order to be strong enough to hold the intense frequency of the vibrations associated with her arrival on this earthly plane. The moment of conception was announced to them by the angel Gabriel, who had also heralded the conception of their previous 11 children. According to Anna's testimony, these were his words: "Behold, born to you shall be she who reigns at the left hand of the God of your fathers, even that one who represents the divine mother principle, the intelligence behind and within all that is. She shall represent to the world the very foundation of a new covenant, and he shall come through her loins, even as she will come through you, who are favored among women. And though her essence shall be imprinted upon Joachim, who represents the Father, his physical seed shall not enter her womb, but etherically his seed shall enter in, and his essence will merge with yours, and also hers, who is promised." During a period of political unrest in Palestine, Anna and Joachim took refuge in Ephesus, in a house belonging to Joseph of Arimathea, and it was here that Mary was born and spent the first 3 years of her childhood, until her parents felt it was safe enough for them to return to the Essene community at Mount Carmel. While she was in Ephesus, Mary learned to speak Aramaic, Hebrew, and Greek, and when she moved to Mount Carmel, her wide-ranging education continued with spiritual teachers who came to the community from India, Egypt, and Greece, and who, between them, contributed to preparing her for her future role. When she was older, she spent time in Jerusalem, receiving instruction from one of the high priestesses of the temple there, whose name was also Anna. When she was 16, she was betrothed and married to Joseph, one of the men who had been brought up in the Mount Carmel community. He was himself an advanced initiate and teacher within the order, some years older than Mary. As before with the conception of Mary, the annunciation of the conception of Jesus was given to the couple on a higher level of reality by the four great archangels, Gabriel, Michael, Raphael, and Uriel. As it had been with the conception of Mary, so it was with the conception of Jesus. Joseph's physical seed was not used, but his etheric seed merged with the soul of the great being who would become his son. Joachim and Anna, Mary and Joseph all received the grace of this annunciation. The mysterious science of these immaculate conceptions was known as the light conception and was taught in the temples of Egypt, as were the rituals of crucifixion and resurrection. Shortly before Mary was due to give birth, the community received news that a decree had been sent out by Caesar Augustus that all people should take part in a census, returning to the town of their ancestral origin to be registered. At first there was consternation, as the birth of Mary's child was imminent. Then the party set out for Bethlehem in carts drawn by oxen and riding mules and camels. They were able to stay in a small village near Bethlehem in the home of a relative who made them welcome. The next day they set out for Bethlehem to take part in the census. Mary's birth contractions began that evening after an exhausting day spent among crowds of people in the town. Fortunately, they were able to find sanctuary in the small house belonging to her as John the Baptist. There, on a bed prepared for her in a small upper room above a stable, attended by her mother Anna and Elizabeth, Mary gave birth to her son, Jesus, or Jeshua, as he was called. He was born an hour after midnight in early April in the year 4 BC. Mary Magdalene, his future wife, whom he would come to know when they both met in the community at Mount Carmel, was born in Bethany, not far from Bethlehem, on the same day, with only a few hours between them. Mary Magdalene was the daughter of Joseph of Arimathea, Anna's son by her first husband. Her mother was his second wife and a high priestess of the Shekinah, or Divine Mother. So Jesus and Mary Magdalene were the grandson and granddaughter of Anna. As recorded in the Gospels, alerted by a star, a group of magi, or wise men traveling from the east, had arrived in Jerusalem, searching for the child whose imminent arrival they'd been informed of by their knowledge of the stars. They, together with their wives, were welcomed by Joseph of Arimathea in his large house in Jerusalem. It was here that Mary and Jesus were brought to meet them when Jesus was about 7 weeks old. And here, in recognition that Jesus was the anointed one, they bestowed their gifts on him, among them a collar of lapis and gold that had belonged to the pharaoh Akhenaten, and a menat, or sacred necklace of healing, of the goddess Hathor, that had come from the treasury of his mother. Soon after this, Joseph, Mary Anna's husband, she's called Mary Anna in this book, and I call her Mary to make it easier for us to understand. Joseph was warned in a dream not to return to Mount Carmel, but to go directly to Egypt in order to escape Herod, who was seeking out recently born children to kill them. With the help of Joseph of Arimathea, a boat was made ready at the port of Joppa to take the family to Egypt, and they set sail at once for Alexandria, where relatives and friends of the Essene community were ready to welcome them. They settled in the city of Heliopolis, where one of Anna's daughters took them into her home. And for the next 7 years of his life, Jesus was surrounded by an adoring family of aunts and uncles and young cousins. In the next 3 years, Mary gave birth to twin sons, James and Jude, and a further son, Joseph, a week after these. During the years spent at Heliopolis, Mary and Joseph, Isis and Hathor in particular, as well as in the inner chambers of the Great Pyramid. Jesus was also introduced gently to the mysteries of Isis, Osiris, and Horus, to the extent able to assimilate elements of these at his young age. In AD 5, Joseph received word that it was time to return to Mount Carmel. And so just before Jesus' 8th birthday, together with other relatives and assistants, and with Mary pregnant with another child, the family set out for Mount Carmel, making a pilgrimage to the sacred site on Mount Sinai, where Moses had received the tablets of the law on the way. Finally, they reached Mount Carmel, and there, to great rejoicing by the whole community, Mary was united with her mother, and Jesus with his adoring grandmother. It was in Mount Carmel that Jesus and Mary Magdalene first met when they were 8 years old, recognizing each other instantly as soulmates. At the age of 15, it was decided that Jesus should go to India. And while he traveled to India to acquire more spiritual initiations in preparation for his mission, Mary Magdalene was sent to the Essene community in Egypt to embark on a series of initiations that were to prepare her for her future role as wife of Jesus. Joseph accompanied 3 of his sons, Jesus, James, and Jude, to India, but he did not return with them, as he was taken up into the light shortly before Jesus and James returned from India, leaving Mary a widow in the house that he had built for his family in Nazareth. In AD 21, after 7 years in India, at the age of 24, Jesus returned to Palestine, and within a year went again to Egypt, where he spent a further 3 years. A group of others from Mount Carmel, including Mary Magdalene, went with him and stayed once again in Heliopolis with Anna's daughter. From there, some of them embarked on a further series of initiations in different Egyptian temples, following the course of the Nile from Komombo in the south up to the temple of Hathor at Dendera, where he spent several months, and also the temple of Isis at Philae. The chambers below and within the Great Pyramid were the site of his final initiation. His 6 companions in this most arduous and demanding final initiation included Mary Magdalene and John, later known as the Baptist. From AD 29, after Jesus had returned to India for another year, we can follow in the Gospels the story of what happened after these years of intensive inner preparation. We know that the 2 Marys, his mother and his wife, traveled with him as he went about his teaching mission in Galilee and in Jerusalem and the surrounding towns and villages. They gathered around them 12 close disciples and their wives, making 24 in all, most of whom had prepared for many years to work with Jesus in his mission. In the Gospels, the wives of the disciples are not mentioned. Over the next 4 years, the number increased to 144 disciples, 72 male and 72 female. We know from Anna's account that many years in advance, his mother and grandmother were both aware of what lay ahead and the suffering and anguish they would experience, as the man whom they both loved and cherished from infancy had to go through the horrific experience of the crucifixion. Anna's description of the crucifixion and subsequent restoration and resurrection of Jesus enormously amplify the events recorded in the Gospels and show that everything was prepared by his immediate family to assist the process of his return to consciousness in his immortal body. She also describes the descent of the Shekinah, or Holy Spirit, on the close relatives and disciples of Jesus, and finally their escape from Palestine at the time of persecution, and their terrifying journey from Alexandria to France in a ship belonging to the fleet of Joseph of Arimathea. This ship carried the assembled family of Anna, Mary, and Mary Magdalene, as well as Joseph's other children, Martha and Lazarus, and grandchildren. I've taken some time to describe the inner transformational and revelatory initiations that were experienced by Anna and her husband Joachim for receiving into their care the highly evolved soul of the woman we know as the Virgin Mary, and what further initiations were taken by Mary to enable her to carry the very high vibrations of her son, Jesus, or Yeshua, as he was called. It is clear from Anna's book that an extensive and long-established Essene community whose teaching about the indwelling divine spirit originated in the temple schools of Egypt was an essential part of their preparation for their assigned roles. This teaching, together with Anna's extended family of children and grandchildren in both Palestine and Egypt, and their connections with enlightened rishis in India, provided the essential foundation for the long preparation of Jesus in Egypt and India for his future mission. Now I can turn to the archetypal aspect of this story. Once she has given birth to Jesus, the Virgin Mary does not play a prominent role in the Gospels other than her presence at the marriage at Cana, which was the marriage of Jesus and Mary Magdalene, and at the crucifixion. Yet, within 500 years of her death, she has mysteriously been raised to the level of a goddess and assumed the iconography of earlier great goddesses, Isis, Hathor, and Artemis of Ephesus. Those who only know the Christian tradition do not know how deep the roots of Mary go, or how the prayers to her echo the immemorial prayers addressed to ancient goddesses, including the Druid goddess of Chartres. Mary, like these older goddesses, is personified by the morning star, as well as by the moon, whose crescent is often shown beneath her feet. In 431, at a council in Ephesus, the city where Mary had been born and had possibly been taken up into the light, and where the great temple of the goddess Artemis had stood for centuries, Mary was proclaimed not only Christ-bearer, but God-bearer, or Mother of God, Theotokos. In giving her this title, she was implicitly, though not doctrinally, recognized as a feminine counterpart of the Divine Father. In the Catholic and Orthodox churches, the commemoration of her Assumption came to be celebrated on the 15th of August. The cult of the Virgin Mary reached its height in the Middle Ages. In France alone, 100 churches and over 80 cathedrals were dedicated to her, of which Notre Dame and Chartres were the most famous. In the portals of Notre Dame and Chartres, sculpted in the 12th century, Mary is portrayed as Queen of Heaven, seated on the throne of wisdom, as Isis before her. 3 centuries later, Italian, German, and Flemish artists painted the Annunciation, the Nativity, and many images of the coronation of the Virgin, where Christ and Mary are seated side by side, as if participants in a sacred marriage. In 1950, in response to a petition signed by 8 million people, Pius XII declared the Assumption of the Virgin to be official doctrine, stating that Mary was taken up body and soul into the glory of heaven. In 1954, a papal encyclical proclaimed her Queen of Heaven, thereby bestowing on her the title once held by earlier great goddesses who had been worshipped as Queen of Heaven. In the last 1,000 years, there have been at least 21,000 visions of Mary, some of which have led to the creation of places of healing, like Lourdes. For many centuries, Mary has been prayed to for help and healing by millions of Catholics who have left countless tokens of gratitude in her shrines that their prayers have been answered. Although Mary is named as Queen of Heaven, she stands as intercessor between earth and heaven, for the connecting principle of life, for the soul, the feminine principle of relationship that connects all things and beings to each other, for the supreme values of the heart. She is the grail of compassion and healing. She is the guardian of the sacredness of all life. In her suffering as Mother of Jesus, she brings the divine world closer to human experience, human longing, and human suffering. In a wider sense, Mary, as Divine Mother, witnesses and endures the suffering of the whole of humanity, her child, until we return home to the light of the divine spheres. Mary reveals herself to be the root and portal of life, the womb of creation, the fountain and the rose garden, all images that also belong to the Shekinah as the feminine counterpart of the male deity. Why would Mary be given such an exalted position and significance unless there was an unacknowledged need in the collective Christian soul for the restoration or recovery of the feminine aspect of the divine? And why should this happen in the 1950s unless there was a growing recognition that something essential was missing and needed, and in order to bring balance and wholeness to the human psyche, a psyche that had recently emerged from the trauma of the Second World War and the use of the nuclear bomb? All this shows the huge importance accorded to the figure of Mary. Archetypally, she carries the missing feminine aspect of the divine, And that is precisely what her mother Anna describes as she prepared herself to be the vessel capable of receiving the highly evolved soul of her daughter Mary Anna as the incarnation on this planet of the divine feminine. As all of you know, one of the places in Europe sacred to the Virgin and long before her to the older Druidic Great Mother is Chartres Cathedral. Chartres was built as a temple for the Queen of Heaven. The rose itself was a symbol of divine wisdom, and the whole cathedral with its three rose windows was a hymn to Mary as the throne of wisdom. And I have these beautiful roses which I picked today from my garden after torrential rain yesterday. The origins of the sacredness of the rose may be traced to the beautiful 8-year orbital pattern made by the planet Venus. From ancient times, it was associated with the great goddesses of the ancient world. The rose is one of the oldest symbols of the wisdom tradition and of divine wisdom, the Holy Spirit, radiating love to our world from the divine ground. Like the 1,000-petaled lotus or jewel in the heart of the lotus of the Eastern traditions, the rose came to symbolize not only the Holy Spirit, but the awakened soul united with the divine ground. Mary was known in the Middle Ages, the time of the building of Chartres, as the Rosa Mystica. To find its shape so emphasized in the 3 great rose windows of Chartres and other Gothic cathedrals suggests that the symbolism of the rose held great significance and meaning for its builders. In our modern era, we are experiencing a profound paradigm shift as we move from seeing the universe as a lifeless machine to seeing it as a sacred, unified, and living organism in whose life we participate as co-creators with it. We are awakening from a long sleep of ignorance or amnesia to awareness that we and the life around us, that we call nature, are woven into a cosmic tapestry whose threads connect us not only with each other at the deepest level, but with the divine ground of life. Beyond our present time-bound sight, a limitless field of consciousness interacts with our own, asking to be recognized by us, embraced by us. The realization that we participate in a multi-dimensional reality that is the source and ground of our own being may eventually shatter the belief that material reality is all there is, that we exist on a tiny planet in a lifeless universe, and that there is no life beyond death. We are the living embodiment of spirit, but we don't know this. The great work of alchemy that Anna, Mary, Jesus, and Mary Magdalene experienced in the temples of Egypt was about the arduous process of attunement to this realization. Arduous because the evolution of consciousness takes eons of earth time, and it is so difficult to recover and understand in one lifetime what has been lost over the centuries. Many deeply imprinted beliefs and habits impede this understanding, and it is hard to dismantle the structures of belief that have been built up over millennia. It may be that the soul of the cosmos has waited eons for us to reach the point where more than a handful of individuals could awaken to awareness of the ground that animates and supports the whole of our existence. This is the sublime message that Anna and her daughter Mary and grandson Jesus carried in their devoted mission to the world, transmitting the message that the cosmos is calling us to become aware that we participate in its life, that everything is sacred and connected, one life, one divine spirit. Thank you.
Oh boy, thank you, Anne. I think that is probably the most concise and profound exoteric and esoteric account of the interactivity of the personalities involved in the birth and life and death and resurrection of Jesus with Mary and Mary Magdalene and Joseph of Arimathea and Anna and Joachim that I've heard in a long time. And so I want to express my appreciation to you for that. And all that is embedded in the stone and in the windows of Chartres. I was just an hour before the call, gazing on the great Mary Rose window in the north transit there, and right beneath Mary and the rose window and the 12 around the one is a beautiful, beautiful window in resplendent red of Anna, her mother, holding the baby Mary. And so thank you for that. And I would just say, before turning to Banafsheh, that these issues are what we're going to be delving into very deeply in the August course, Madonna Rising. Because as Anne was just pointing out, the rise of Mary, the rise of the feminine, finally codified in 1950 by Pius XII, is doctrinally, Carl Jung said, was the most momentous doctrinal statement in 2,000 years of Christianity. It was the rising of the Madonna into the Godhead, and sitting on the left hand of the divine. And it was the coming home and the final ascendancy of the feminine in the Christian tradition after several thousand years of being vanquished and suppressed and hidden. So what this means for our time is a very profound issue we'll be addressing. And also in different ways, as we gather in just a month's time in Chartres for the 7th Liberal Art of Astronomica. So these are the rich layers of truth and tradition and archetypal mythology with which we've been grappling for many, many years. And this is what draws us to Chartres year after year as the sanctum sanctorum of the university. So thank you so much, Anne. Banafsheh?
Thank you so much, and that was just amazing, remarkable, as usual, as always. I'm going to take a different approach. I'm going to share my experiences with the presence of the lady in Chartres, and share with you briefly about them and give my perspective on the rising Madonna. I was first called to Chartres in 2016 by the liberal art of musica. Musica calls in the dancer that I am. And during the whole 7 days that I was in the intensive, each of my personal visits to the cathedral were marked by a shattering and an embracing, a mending. I felt I was constantly dying to the old parts of myself and being reborn. I stayed even past the intensive for as long as I could, and my stay was filled with amazing synchronicities and guidance by Our Lady. During this time, I became a full devotee of the particular frequency of Our Lady that one experiences in Chartres. And like many, I called her Mother Mary. And filled with love for her, the dance workshops that I taught during the year that preceded were infused by her and references to her. And in the following year, my second year in Chartres, during the liberal art of arithmetica, I came back as a devotee, ready to worship her and invoke her presence at every chance I could get. But she announced very clearly and very strongly from the beginning, don't talk about me, be me. I reflected deeply on that and had profound experiences when we walked the labyrinth. And every time I would ask, what do you mean by this? The answer was simply, be me. I didn't stay past the intensive that year, but took this guidance into the year that followed and into my workshops. In my annual pilgrimage and workshop in Turkey, without much advanced planning, we just immediately journeyed into the essence of Mary, Maryam, the only person to whom the Quran devotes an entire surah. Surah 19 of the Quran is called Maryam. we infused the dargah, the Sufi lodge where I've been teaching for many years, a place primarily infused with the masculine energies of the Godhead. We infused it with her energy, chanting the feminine names of the divine without reserve and without caution. And to our surprise, to the joy of the locals there. I returned to Chartres in my 3rd year, and this was last year, with the liberal arts of geometrica. I stayed for about a month or so after our intensive, and during this time I became aware of the ritual during the Feast of the Assumption, in which the Black Madonna is honored and paraded in the streets, reminiscent of the Druidic roots of the site, where she's also placed for 7 days at the foot of the statue of the Assumption, flanked with a beautiful array of flowers. And this was when our vision for this year's Madonna Rising was birthed. Along with this vision, she stated, this time she stated to me, tell everyone to be me. And on one evening where I was blessed with a chance to be in the cathedral at dusk, all by myself, you can just imagine how it felt to be inside this incredible majesty, all by yourself. A deep, deep silence filled the halls. And I have to say, it is true that even at night, light emits from the stained glass, and the cathedral is lit. And then, of course, the luminaire, the light show began, and from the outside, and the light that shone through the stained glass very beautifully in the environment of the inside of the cathedral. But in the deep silence, I could feel a very palpable presence. And I asked, who are you? I asked this question because I didn't feel this presence was only what I had known to be Mother Mary. There were many other qualities and resonances present. And as I was blessed to be given the chance to dance and whirl in the labyrinth, which I hope to share more insights from on other occasions, the other qualities and resonances of this presence became known to me. Some of the qualities and resonances, I should say. And one very striking resonance was Our Lady Mary Magdalene. The resonances that were much older, Isis, Sophia, and more primal, Tiamata. I reflected on the statement, tell everyone to be me. What I have to say here right now to you is that the divine feminine is real. She exists. She says, all the images you have constructed of me are real. All of them are real. I'm all of these manifestations. And really, I am. Whichever manifestation, image, or images of me appeals to you and draws you, be that, because you are that. Embody and emulate it. And let that guide you. Let me teach you in this way. This is how I teach you. So learn, she says, about the manifestation. Learn fully, whether it's Inanna, Durga, Aphrodite, Kali, Mother Mary, all of the manifestations. And of course, first, you need to become present in your body. For your body is your temple. It is the temple. At this time, this time past the last year, she told me also to bring the women back and let there be dance in the cathedral. And also learn from how the cathedral, how it reveals the marriage and the union of the feminine and the masculine and the feminine coming into partnership, both inside yourself and in the world. Marrying the feminine principles of the heart and intuition, for example, with the masculine principles of the mind and intellect, which is a journey we will devote to in our Madonna Rising intensive in August. And to finish, to end, I will add the guidance I received thus far, having been here in Chartres for 11 days, that I hope to develop further in our time during Cosmic Dance of Astronomica and Madonna Rising in August. This guidance is that your body is your soul. There is no difference. Your soul is manifested through your body. It carries all the qualities of your soul. It is no different. It's just your soul becoming matter, becoming concrete in a way. And it's time to embody the energy of Sekhmet, the lioness, the lion, to claim our royalty as humans and courageously liberate and free ourselves of all forms of bondage and slavery. The old paradigm, religious systems, the social institutions that are wreaking havoc on our world. We need to claim a holistic relationship with our bodies, with each other, with the earth, and all of the earth family, so we may contribute harmoniously to the cosmic family. Madonna rising is Gaia rising, the sacredness of life in our hearts, in our bodies, in our minds, in our souls, together. Thank you.
Thank you, Banafsheh. It's so enriching just to have this awareness that each and every one of us are refracting the Madonna and the feminine in our own unique ways. And all of us on this call, all of us that are going to gather, I think we've reached over 100 now that are gathering in about a month's time. And as I was listening to Banafsheh and Anne, knowing that they're holding different sides of the same energetic, I was just thinking there's 75 people on this call, and every one of us holds the feminine with a specific tonality. And as Banafsheh has just said, it's all true. It's all real. And Anne, when you were holding up the rose to smell the rose, I just had this beautiful ecstatic feeling that that's the feminine. Just the smell of a rose on Pentecost as the Spirit descending shatters the air with flames of incandescent terror, says T.S. Eliot, of which the tongues declare the one discharge from sin and error. And so thank you, Banafsheh, and thank you, all of you, for holding the feminine so deeply in all of our hearts. And in that spirit, we'll turn to Apela. And then those of you who want to comment after Apela, please indicate by just raising your hand. You can do that by just clicking on the chat box and raising your hand, and then we'll call on one or two of you, and then we'll bring the call to a close. Apela?
Yes, in order to give people time to respond, I'll make my remarks brief. And first, a symbol. You can see this image of Mary Magdalene and what she's carrying, the balm, the sacred balm, and in that little vase that she has, you notice her hands are above it and she's ready to open it. And she's ready to open it for you when you come to Chartres or you participate in these calls. For myself, I'm an American Indian, Oneida. I'm also almost half French. And I live my life as a traditional American Indian with an uneasy, especially as I grew into my teen years, an uneasy relationship with the Catholic Church, and then actually just hatred and fear of it because of some experiences that I had. The time came in my life when I was recovering from cancer. And at that time, I was given a trip to France from a dear friend of mine who wanted me to heal and knew that I was interested in looking at my French ancestry. So I got to France, and what I didn't expect, traveling to the south of France with a friend who's actually from there, we arrived, and it was, we were at the St. Mary's, and that's where Mary Magdalene is said to have come in. And all of that was, I didn't really know anything about it. We were looking for the villages of my ancestors. And I was surprised when I got there to see all of the just hundreds and hundreds of gypsies everywhere, because they were also there because it was their annual pilgrimage to the site to celebrate Saint Sarah, their patroness, who they believe also came with Mary Magdalene, Black Sarah, the Black Madonna, to them. So that night, my friend and I, the first night there, we prayed together, and then we tried to sleep, but it was very hot. And I left the window of my room, which was on the first floor, open. It's like a window that opens like a door. And immediately below me, I could see the orange tiled roof of the restaurant sticking out at a right angle. I was tossing and turning, and I had the only book I could find on the south of France and the spiritual traditions there was some Templar Revelation. And it was really intellectual, kind of boring actually. And before I'd left my house, I tore through my mail going out the door, and there was some magazine that had given me a bookmark, and I threw it in the book without even looking at it. And that night, I tried to read the book, but so put it on the nightstand, and I go to sleep. And in a few minutes, it seemed like later, I woke but couldn't open my eyes, and I could feel something or someone in the room. Really terrifying, and also terrifying because I was conscious to the fact that I could not wake up. It was as if my jet lag sleep was some kind of drug. As my spirit searched the room, I could feel that whoever was in there or whatever was in there meant me no harm. So in my spirit, in my mind, I said, I welcome this being, and I said I should get up and I should burn my smudge and I should welcome you properly, but I cannot wake up. So you're welcome. And then I slept. Some time passed, and I suddenly woke up again, and it was dawn, and it was a peculiar dawn. The sky and the earth were merged in sort of this apricot light. And as I looked at the light, I realized that I was standing next to someone whose arm was around my shoulder, and that I couldn't move either. I couldn't move. I only could stare where this personage wanted me to stare, in this case, straight ahead. The feeling standing next to this being, which I realized shortly was a woman, was beyond words. The intelligence, the wisdom, the love, the depth, and I tried to see who she was, and I couldn't. And then her arm moved in front of me and gestured this way. And I looked, and I beheld a stand of ancient olive trees, the sight of which was so magnificent that I realized if I keep looking, I am going to extinguish myself. The fire is going to just ignite, and I will be gone. And I turned my head, and I, in my mind, asked her, "Who are you?" And in the moment that I asked that, thunders roared and rumbled, rain started coming down, and bird song swelled up to meet it. And I heard this voice in my mind say, "Mary Magdalene." I woke that morning, and I was beside myself in ecstasy. I came down the stairs of that little pension and I wondered, am I Catholic again? And what about my traditional indigenous spirituality? What about my traditional Oneida identity? Because it had just been obliterated. I was drunk in ecstasy of Mary Magdalene. She was all I could think about, all I wanted to be. I realized that if I were Catholic again, that would be just fine. And when I went home, I actually sought out a priest. I made a reconciliation, and it was a wonderful priest. And I shared with him what had happened to me with a pedophile priest I had encountered as a teenager. And he said to me, normally when people do their reconciliations, I give a penance. And he said, but in this case, your penance was that you had to live separate from this faith all these years. So he said, just sit here for a few minutes because what you've been through and sharing this with me is profound. And then he held out his arms to me and he hugged me and it felt good. And he said, welcome home. And with that, the split in myself between the Catholic and the indigenous was healed. And then it went beyond that, because from that time of being healed, I was able to work with Matthew Fox at Wisdom University and not feel terror every time I saw a priest or a nun. And further from that time, I introduced Jim and Matthew Fox to each other, and Jim took over the organization. Our first trip was to France on a Black Madonna, Mary Magdalene trip. When we got there, I began to understand the meaning of why she had shown me the trees. Our group went to a small park, which we will go to. The shade of the trees, we made offerings and prayers. And from that, the vision of the new Chartres Mystery School was born through Jim's experience and through all our prayers. And now we prepare to visit the sacred place again. So, this is who's waiting for you and what are the gifts of the Magdalene. Thank you.
Thank you, Apela. That was beautiful. That was beautiful. Mary Magdalene led the way. And Apela's suggestion, I dedicated my tenure as president of the university to Mary Magdalene and the Black Madonna. And they have guided me each step of the way. And that's one of the main reasons we're in Chartres every year. It's just to deepen our acknowledgement and our submission to these very powerful cosmic archetypal forces, to invite them in to guide us as we move through what is clearly a quite unstable, sometimes treacherous world, but is full of potential and opportunity. So thank you all for those comments. We have a few minutes left. I wonder if there's anybody that wants to jump in and add anything, any fractals further on the Madonna, Mary Magdalene, Mary, any of the goddesses that anybody wants to share. One question, Anne, that has come in is around the source of your remarks tonight. You indicated it was from a book.
This book, it's called Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, by a woman, wait a minute, Claire Hartsong. It's on Amazon, easy to get. And I thought it was so remarkable. It's all channeled material, but there are quite a lot of facts in it that I recognize. And I just thought it was beautifully written and just fascinating.
Beautiful.
Someone asked about the birth date of Jesus, and she gives it as the year 4 BC, 1 hour after midnight in Bethlehem.
There you go. Jesus was born 4 years before Christ. Well, and just so everybody knows, we'll get Anne's text and send it out to everybody so that everybody can have the benefit of it. But it's Anna, Grandmother of Jesus, by Claire Hodgkins.
Yeah, Heart Song.
Heart Song is the book. So, yeah, Banafsheh, would you like to say anything, or Apela, and then we'll have Apela give us our benediction.
I just want to say a few words because Peggy Rubin couldn't be with us today. Peggy will be joining us in August for the Madonna Rising Intensive, and she has designed our time with the rest of us, of course, with Apela, with Anne, with Jim, with Ruth, and with Andrew, based on the Eleusinian mysteries. So we will be exploring things done, things spoken and sung, and things seen. So we will listen to lecture, and we will sing and dance and visit the cathedral and share dreams. From the beginning to the end, we plan this entire intensive to be more like a ritual, from beginning to end, like a ceremony. So we all enter into the space of the ritual, the space of this initiation through the format of the Eleusinian mysteries, and explore together the Madonna rising in ourselves and how we can contribute to the rising in the world.
A final question from an anonymous attendee. We didn't catch who it was. I think this is for you, Anne. You quoted the Quran, which says Jesus was not crucified on the cross. How does Anne answer people who say Jesus was not crucified?
I don't answer a question like that. It's impossible to answer. I have no knowledge. I mean, I haven't enough knowledge to speak to that.
I think that's wise. I think, you know, we are honoring all the different strands of the traditions. And when you draw on both the esoteric and the exoteric and channeled communications and written material across the span of several thousand years in many different cultures, you have many different storylines. And recited a storyline in which Jesus and Mary Magdalene got married. Others believe that he stayed single. We hold all these lightly. You know, we are very much at Ubiquity University, and particularly in the Chartres Academy, in the spirit of truth pursued, not truth possessed. So we hold the fact that Jesus was crucified and Jesus was not crucified simultaneously as part of the richness of a tradition that continues to speak to us and continues, as we've seen with just the three women tonight, how the truth, these cosmic truths, refract through our personalities in very, very different ways. So I want to thank everyone for rich and textured dialogue and conversation. And I would just want to close before turning it over to Apela to say just a quick word about pilgrimage. pilgrimage is about the journey. So as all of us prepare ourselves for our journey to Chartres, even if you're not physically coming, but you want to join us in spirit, begin that consecration of the soul, because it's the journey here. It's what we will see and do and say in a deep, sacred, ritual space while we are here for 7 days. And then how we bring back what has transformed our soul, what has enlarged our soul as we've communed with one another, as we descended into the crypt, as we've walked the labyrinth, and taken it back on our journey home. That is pilgrimage. The journey, the consecration, the return. And that's what is now before us as we enter into our last 30 days before joining together in this sacred site, infused as it is by the divine feminine. So thank you all for joining. Apela, I'll turn it over to you for our benediction.
Before I do the closing prayer, I just want to observe, Jim, that as we go through, as humanity goes through this great transition, we're moving from causal reasoning to truth derived from paradox. And there is an image creating propensity to complementary pairs of opposites. The Tibetans have a practice where they actually can generate images on mirrors through working with paradox. And that image that I was showing, this one with Mary Magdalene and her jar, we have, when we're at Chartres, we are anointed with Bulgarian rose anointing oil. And with that ceremony, you are inducted into this sacred mystical order. With that, I once again light the cedar, and I give thanks for the reality that we know as the Black Madonna. We give thanks for the new Chartres Academy, and we give thanks to each of the pilgrims who will be joining us in a month's time. For this flame of transformation and renewal, we give thanks. Ah, Mama, ooh, I know all my relations.
Blessings on all of us as we begin our pilgrimage to Chartres. Bye, everyone.
Bye.